around the wellspring of love.
The term love is a traditional one, but a long since worn-out word for countless human beings, which is often pronounced by many only with great shyness. Although love is sung about in all sorts of musical lyrics, because especially in these lyrics everything revolves around love, the whole thing is nothing more than smoke and mirrors, because all the singing words are just empty phrases, but do not correspond to real love. And when love is spoken of among human beings, then the word love is immediately connected with fulfilled or unfulfilled sexuality, which gives the whole thing an ugly sound and defiles the term love. But however great and ugly this defilement in this respect may be, every human being longs for real love at the bottom of his or her thoughts and feelings. Thus, everyone longs for a healthy and positive self-love through which he or she can acknowledge and value himself or herself without being selfish, egoistic, or narcissistic. And equally, every human being longs to be loved in honesty and dignity by another human being without any requirements imposed upon them. And without exception, every human being is filled with joyful thought-feeling-based impulsations when he or she sincerely feels love for another human being. And these impulsations become even greater and more powerful when the love felt is reciprocated by the other. If this happens, then something visibly blossoms in the human being, because his or her face radiates love, joy, and harmony. And this results in every human being to whom love really becomes his or her own, as well as when he or she recognizes that he or she, too, is acknowledged and loved without any requirements in his or her love. Love, so it is told in fairy tales, can, through mischievous/malicious magic, bring enchanted human beings back to life as frogs and animals, or as stone figures, as princes, as girls and boys, or as adults. Of course, these are fairy tales, but love remains in spite of everything, because it is also in fairy tales through which miracles are done, even if they are only fantastic fairy tale figures, who are transformed by love into desirable human beings again, who are happy and can bring happiness. When the human being wishes for love, then he or she wishes not only that he or she can give love, but that he or she is also loved by another or by several others. For love is not a being in love which corresponds only to a thought-feeling-based and thus a superficial impulsation, but it is founded in a spiritual fine sensitive feeling which is much more deep-reaching/profound and goes far beyond all thought-feeling-based impulsations and thus connects deep-reachingly/profoundly. Love is its own immeasurably valuable quality of the inner prosperity, which is also transferred/carried over to other human beings. Be it to a boyfriend, a girlfriend, in the partnership, family, or in relation to a group of human beings, to all his or her fellow human beings as well as to the fauna and flora, nature, the planet or the whole universe, and thus to the creation universal consciousness. And the human being who in this wise feels and cultivates love in himself or herself, knows that what is so prosperous in him or her in this respect is reality and truth, and therefore also true love. And this is so because it radiates, and it is not a being in love, but it is real and truthful. Love is not a being in love with oneself, with a human being, with an object, an animal or anything else, but it is something that permeates everything and that is reflected in the human being himself or herself when he or she perceives in a fine fluid or wise real and true love in himself or herself. Love is the primordial longing of the human being, although this love should ultimately not be directed simply towards fellow human beings, towards oneself or towards any things, because the sense of love is that the human being eventually becomes love itself. Only in this wise that the human being becomes love itself, can it come about that he or she envelopes everything around him or her in his or her love, meets everything with true love, and thus likewise elicits love and the joy of life in his or her fellow human beings. And if this love is given, then every blossom, every blade of grass and every tree leaf, as well as every living creature, is also regarded with love and venerability. True love teaches that all and everything existent is integrated into the prosperity according to creational principles, so that it can master its existence and lead its life according to what is continuously and inexorably determined for it by the principles. Thus the human being, who has created true love in himself or herself, looks at everything all around and is mentally feeling that everything also shows him or her true love and that it flows through him or her. And he or she is mentally feeling that everything, whatever he or she does, is also continuously formed by his or her own love as well as everything that surrounds him or her. The human being needs true love in order to introduce himself or herself to the secret of true love, which bubbles up in him or her as a wellspring when he or she gives it free rein. But he or she must first clear the wellspring of all that is burdensome and impeding in the form of evil, wrong, negative and bad thoughts and feelings that weigh on it and have buried it. However, this must be handled with care. Consequently, even the rubbish must be cleared away with love. If, however, this does not happen in this wise and beneficial things are not used to open the wellspring of love, then an overload takes place, and the unsuitable material is transformed into further burdening and closing the wellspring even more. The material that closes the wellspring is always the aggressive, wrong and negative thoughts and feelings that, by their heavy burden, choke off the love that wants to be reached. These thoughts and feelings are the evil, negative and bad things that act on the wellspring of love, constantly suppressing and closing it in its possible flow, so that it cannot let its love flow freely. And this remains so if the rubbish in the form of negative, negating and bad thoughts and feelings is consciously nurtured instead of letting it be purified by the wellspring of love in such a way that it dissolves and clears the way. If the rubbish remains because it is perpetuated by negative and bad thoughts and feelings, it will remain on the wellspring of love like nasty debris, consequently disrupting and stopping all the major efforts to create love. Therefore, it is necessary to take away everything disturbing of the love that is possible. So therefore the negative, negating and bad impulsations of thoughts and feelings, which as debris close off the wellspring of love. All this must be cleared away, such as the anger, anxiety, falsehood and the fear, jealousy and disappointment, hatred, unhonesty, unpeace, inner imprisonment, disharmony and reluctance. All this must be given up and dissolved, for only in this way can real love gush forth from the wellspring of love and transform the human being into the good and positive. When the human being indulges in true love and lives in it himself or herself, and accompanies himself or herself with it wherever he or she goes, then he or she resolves all his or her inner and outer conflicts, whatever their kind and wherever they may be it in the family, in a friendship, at work or wherever. True love is like a fine breeze that is sprinkled on everything and makes everything resound / undulate lovingly and harmoniously. And when this happens, it changes not only the human being himself or herself, but also his or her life. And when the wellspring of love is bubbling up in the human being, it does not forbid him or her anything. So neither being angry, nor feeling hurt or anything else, because the love only wants that everything that the human being lives / experiences is flooded with true love. And when this actually happens, then conflicts and all unpleasantnesses that occur in existence and life are seen in a completely different light. Even reprimands are understood rightly and are no longer considered as reproaches and unfair accusations. But, if they are understood in love as well-meant and instructive instructions / guidance. If, however, love is lacking, as for example in regard to the recognition of reality and its truth, then understanding is also lacking, consequently self-pity and tearful thoughts and feelings are unavoidable. And even then, when love is embedded in everything, there are not always smooth and quick solutions in life. Especially when the reality and its truth have a certain harshness, which is all too readily wrongly interpreted in a self-pitying, self-congratulatory or ununderstanding and truth-rejecting wise. Love also loves the reality and its truth, and it also wants that all and everything is looked at exactly and with love, so that everything that occurs is interpreted lovingly and rightly, so that nothing wrong arises from it and no impulsations far from the love arise. Thus love also wants thoughts and feelings to be nurtured and cared for in the right kind and wise, to be perceived and taken seriously, and without loveless, self-pitying and truth-rejecting impulsations gaining the upper hand when a conflict appears. But true love also wants the human being not to cling to hurt thoughts and feelings, and also not to generate self-pity and hatred from them. But it wants the human being to let everything be questioned by love, so that he or she there be always only recognizes the reality and its truth and classifies, understands and accepts everything accordingly. Love does not mean to simply have loving thoughts and feelings, but love also requires knowledge and wisdom, so that the good and right can really be seen and accordingly treated with love. The term love comes from the old High German word, Liebe, which means good, loving, appropriate, and pertinent. Consequently, therefore, something is to be regarded as good, to be assessed and treated as good, and so on. However, this requires knowledge and wisdom, so that anything that falls within this framework, for example a human being, a situation, a happening or a rebuke, and so on, is treated with an appreciation/a fondness, something good, a good assessment, a good treatment, or a being pleasing, and so on. Seen in this wise, it becomes possible for the human being to open his or her eyes in love, to see himself or herself and the family members, the human beings in the circle of acquaintances and friends, or the fellow human beings in general, in a new and loving light. In this way, love also opens the sense for discovering the good core of one's own person as well as that of the fellow human beings. And if this happens, then it is also possible to deal better with oneself and with everything all around, and to include everything in one's own truly knowledgeful and wisdomful love. This also makes it possible to deal better with all human beings, conflicts, happenings and situations, as well as with the fauna and flora, the existence, and with one's own life in a more loving kind and wise. It is to be wished that every human being lives more and more into the secret of the creational natural principles of love, that everyone lets the wellspring of love bubble up in him or her, which never dries up/runs out, and makes life worth living. The human being does not have to first create true love in himself or herself from scratch, because it is always present to him or her through the wellspring of love, since it is pre-given by the creational principles. Thus he or she only has to clear away the debris of his or her evil, negative, negating, pessimistic and bad thoughts and feelings from the wellspring, and let it bubble up, so that it never dries up/runs out again, and he or she can drink from it throughout his or her life.
Simya Silver Star Center, February 23, 2013, 6:00 p.m. Billy.
Love of life.
When the human being recognizes love as a creational natural presence everywhere, then he or she knows that he or she is responding to it rightly and honoring it, appreciating it, and that it is giving itself to him or her for all of one's life.
Simya Silver Star Center, October 18, 2013, 11:10 Billy.
Translation: Bruce Lula, United States of America.